Just over a century ago, a tiny Cape Cod town was attacked during World War I. That attack came from a German U-boat that surfaced right off of Cape Cod's Nauset Beach in Orleans, Massachusetts. It was the only time that United States soil was attacked by the enemy during World War I. The submarine was firing at 5 U.S. commercial vessels sailing south along Cape Cod's coastline in the vicinity of Orleans. But they may not have been the intended target of the U-boat. Recent discovered German historical documents suggests that the U-boat was actually here for something else, on a top secret mission. Welcome to History on a Hog. I'm your host, Captain Boz. I've been riding and checking out the various towns and beaches on Cape Cod, Massachusetts, when I came across this historical marker here at Nauset Beach, telling me about this World War I German attack and how it was the only attack on American soil during the First World War. I'd never heard about it. Intrigued, I decided to take a look into it. This German attack took place on July 21st of 1918. By this time, the United States had been engaged in World War I for just over a year. The American army had arrived in France and had been involved in heavy fighting against the German army for about 9 months. The war at sea was also very active. The combined navies of Great Britain, France, and America were enforcing a blockade of all German ports. This tactic was intended to restrict the maritime supply of goods to the Central Powers, making them weaker, essentially starving out their enemies, and simultaneously keep the Imperial German Navy bottled up in their respective ports. In contrast, the German Imperial Navy relied heavily on the use of their highly sophisticated and effective Unterseeboats, or U-boats, to conduct offensive naval operations against the Allies and their commercial shipping. For the German Imperial Navy, the war at sea was focused on the deadly Battle of the Atlantic and the commercial shipping convoy routes that provided weapons, ammunition, troops, and food for the Allies. This battlefield ranged from England all the way to the eastern shores of Canada and the United States. And here, the German Navy was winning, due in large part to the successes of their very effective long-range U-boat fleet. The U-boats ruled the seas and brought terror wherever they appeared. So when a very large 2-cannon German U-boat suddenly surfaced off of Nauset Beach on July 21st, 1918, and began attacking the vessels, it sent a shockwave throughout the town of Orleans. And like today, Nauset Beach was very popular, with many people enjoying a pleasant day on the beach. The U-boat that surfaced off of Cape Cod that day was a Deutschland-type long-range U-boat, built for the German Imperial Navy in January of 1917. Designated the U-156, she was one of 7 U-boats that were designed to cross the Atlantic all the way to the United States. Under the command of Kapitänleutnant Richard Feld, she departed Germany and proceeded to the American Northeast coast to lay mines and sink commercial shipping. By mid-morning of July 21st, the U-156 was patrolling just off of Cape Cod when she detected a tugboat towing 4 barges about 3 miles offshore. It was the tugboat Perth Amboy, a 120-foot steel tugboat, towing the barges. They were steaming south en route to Norfolk, Virginia, Combined, these 5 vessels carried a total of 32 people, including 4 women and 5 children. In those days, many of the tug and barge crews took their families along.
And so, just before 10:30 a.m. on July 21st, the U-156 surfaced out there and began firing torpedoes at the Perth Antboy that was moving in a southerly direction. But they all missed, exploding on the beach.
After missing with its torpedoes, the U-boat began firing its large deck cannon at the tug and barges. Amazingly, the very first shot hit the wheelhouse of the tugboat, setting it on fire. The helmsman of the tug was hit and seriously wounded. The U-boat then shifted its focus onto the barges and began firing shell after shell at them, hitting and eventually sinking all 4 of them.
The many summer tourists on the beach watched in horror as the German U-boat attacked the defenseless tug and barges. Close to 1,000 citizens watched the spectacle from shore. Luckily, none of the beachgoers would be injured during the attack. Interestingly, it was noted by several eyewitnesses that many of the cannon shells seemed to overshoot the barges by a wide margin, almost intentionally. Many of the shells impacted well inland toward the town of Orleans.
At the nearby Nauset Beach Coast Guard Station number 40, the on-duty Coast Guardsman, Bill Moore, heard the explosions down the beach and quickly climbed up into the observation tower to see what was happening. He was horrified by what he saw: a U-boat on the surface firing its deck gun at the barges.
After seeing the U-boat's attack on the tug and barges, Moore notified his commander, station keeper Robert Francis Pierce, of the situation. Pierce immediately ordered that the surf boats be dragged out of the station and rowed out to the stricken vessels to render assistance. Moore and his Coast Guard station mates immediately launched a surf boat and rowed over 3 miles under enemy shell fire to the stricken vessels.
Simultaneously, Pierce notified the newly established Naval Air Station located nearby at Chatham, Massachusetts, by phone with a short and to-the-point message. Quote, "Tug and 3 barges being fired upon by U-boat, and 1 is sinking 3 miles off Coast Guard Station 40." End quote. As the surf boat approached the now sinking tug, the concussions from the U-156 deck guns blew the hats off the surfmen. Undaunted, the Coast Guardsmen rowed through the shell explosions and proceeded to the barges, where they systematically rescued all the sailors and family members that were trapped aboard the now rapidly sinking vessels.
The act of heading out in a 26-foot surf boat into an area being shelled by an enemy submarine, I think, shows the remarkable bravery and dedication to duty by the Coast Guard rescue crew. The action of those Coast Guardsmen were remarkable that morning, and they rescued all 32 lives aboard those 5 vessels. But what about the U-boat? Well, do you remember that phone call that was placed to the Chatham Naval Air Station by Coast Guard Station Keeper Pierce?
Upon receiving the call, the air station commander immediately ordered his only 2 operable seaplanes to take off from the newly established Chatham Naval Air Station and attack the U-boat.
During World War I, many of the U.S. Navy's air stations were commanded by U.S. Coast Guard aviators.
During this period, the Navy believed ships were more important than airplanes, and it needed all its naval officers to man ships, not gallivanting around in the skies. Many naval aviators were transferred out of aviation, leaving a big gap of leadership for its air stations.
In contrast, the U.S. Coast Guard understood the importance of the airplane. As a result, the Coast Guard had an abundance of qualified naval aviators. So when war was declared in 1917 and the Navy absorbed the entire Coast Guard into naval operations, they placed many experienced Coast Guard aviators in command of their air stations. Chatham Naval Air Station on Cape Cod was one of them, and they assigned Coast Guard First Lieutenant Philip B. Eaton as its commanding officer.
After being notified of the attack, the only planes that Lieutenant Eaton had available were two HS-1 flying boats. The third was still in its crate, waiting to be assembled. These planes were manned by a crew of 3, and they each had one bomb, and only one bomb, under the wing as their primary weapon. By late morning of July 21st, Eaton had ordered 2 of his airplanes into the air to locate and attack the U-boat. The first plane to respond to the attack was piloted by Ensign Eric Lingard.
Lingard made the first bomb run at the U-156 at 800 feet. He had the sub directly lined up amidships, but when the bombardier pulled the bomb release, it did not function. Undaunted, Lingard swung around and made a second run at 400 feet. But again, the bomb failed to drop.
Exasperated, the airplane bombardier climbed out onto the lower wing as the aircraft lined up on the U-boat for its second run. While holding onto a wing strut with one hand, he began to manually kick the bomb release while Lingard lined up for the attack at 400 feet. With uncanny precision, the bomb was finally kicked loose just as the plane flew over the sub.
What an incredible act of bravery! Unfortunately, even though the bomb had landed within a few feet of the submarine, it did not explode. These early bomb detonators were just poorly designed.
Soon after, a second plane appeared on scene, piloted by the commanding officer, Coast Guard Lieutenant Eaton. By now, the crew of the 156 had been alerted, and they had manned their anti-aircraft guns and began firing at the airplane attacking them. Undaunted, Eaton lined up the U-boat at an altitude of 500 feet and, using Kentucky windage, released his bomb while nearly over the sub. His release worked, but like before, the bomb had failed to explode.
The bomb had landed within 100 feet of the sub, and had it detonated, the resulting explosion would likely have destroyed the U-boat. But as I said, these early aerial bombs were just plain unreliable. Now he was out of bombs, so out of sheer frustration, Eaton swung his airplane around and lined up for a second run on the sub. And as he flew over the sub, he threw out the heaviest thing he had left on board the aircraft, a monkey wrench. It landed squarely on the deck of the submarine with a loud clang, much to the astonishment of the submarine's crew.
The sudden appearance and unorthodox attack of the second plane was so concerning to the U-boat commander, Captain Felt, that he ordered an immediate dive, and he withdrew from the area. The U-boat quickly submerged and disappeared underneath the waves, never to be seen again.
However, there are many unresolved questions surrounding this U-boat's attack. For instance, why was the U-156 so very close to the coast, near Orleans, in the first place? What was the value there? Why take such an enormous risk of being detected and attacked for such measly targets as the tug and tow? And why did so many errant cannon shells miss their target and land towards Orleans? To me, something just doesn't add up. In fact, in 2017, some World War I naval historians uncovered evidence that suggests that the U-156 was given a different mission by the German High Command for this particular patrol, a top secret mission. It was to locate, destroy, and sever the most important strategic communication link between France and the United States. That communications link consisted of a French underwater communications cable that originated in France and ended up here in New Orleans. This building was the end of the line. The building was used as a communications hut to decode incoming messages from France and then send them via telegraph to the War Department in Washington, D.C. These naval historians have suggested that this building was probably the actual target for the U-156 that day. And research completed in 2017 has added considerable new evidence to this theory. So it's easy to speculate that this was the reason why Captain Felt took such high risk to the safety of his submarine that day. He wanted to make sure that he had destroyed the cable hut. And I think Captain Felt thought that he had succeeded, but he would never know. The U-156 would be sunk 2 months later on its return voyage home. It is believed she had hit an underwater mine in the water somewhere between the UK and Norway. There were no survivors. History notes that the cable was never cut. Well, I hope you enjoyed the episode. I found this story incredibly fascinating and very interesting, and I really learned a lot. Anyway, I'm working on my next series, so please stay tuned. Until then, ride safe. And I'll see you next time on History on a Hawk.